Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Far Cry 5. I played it on the Xbox One, it's also available on the PS4 and PC. So the story for this game is you are a deputy, everybody calls you Rook because you are the rookie, and you are along with a US Marshal to go arrest Joseph Seed. Joseph Seed is the head of what is referred to as the Peggies, Project Eden Gate, something else, I don't remember. They're basically a cult, and they're doomsday preppers, so they're heavily armed, and basically the collapse begins, and they start kidnapping people and just kind of going apeshit. And by apeshit, I mean they'll kill anybody who doesn't want to go with them, and they'll drug people who don't necessarily want to, or brainwash them. You've got John Seed, who he basically kidnaps people, tortures them into confessing their sins. Then you've got Faith, who is in charge of the drug Bliss, and she basically uses that to manipulate and brainwash people into thinking they're happy joining the cult. But too much Bliss will cause you to go brain dead because there are the Angels, which are basically just people who have been so drug-addled by Bliss that they're practically zombies. And lastly, there's Jacob Seed, who is like the militant one, and he takes people and brainwashes them. So your goal is to basically bring all that to the ground. I'll also say none of these characters were super interesting to me. Like, the bad guys in the Far Cry series, except for Primal, have been fairly interesting since 3. Like, 3 and 4 had some great villains. But this one, not so much, and the main character doesn't even have a personality in this one. He's the silent protagonist type. Now, I'll give you a heads up, near the end I'm going to bring up the story once more, because it's very important to my overall rating of the game. So on to the audio. The voiceover work is very good. Like, everyone you do hear from does an excellent job. I love the soundtrack when you're driving, that is fantastic. I also really enjoyed the sound effects for the different weapons, if you have them suppressed, if you don't, for the animals, the bow and arrow, the cars, etc. I will say that there were cutscenes where there were definitely missing sound effects, and it was fairly noticeable. The missing sound effects were not massive, but they were noticeable, and they could kind of take you out of the moment. As for the gameplay, not a whole lot different with this game since Far Cry 3, honestly. And I don't want to draw the comparison, but they haven't evolved the game much at this point. It's still the go take down outposts, do side missions, do story missions, build up your basically rep with the leader of whoever you're going after, and then you get to go and take them down. I will say the one with John Seed, the dogfight, that sucked. Flying the plane trying to take him down in a dogfight, that really sucked. As I just mentioned, dogfight, so aerial dogfight, there are now planes, there are helicopters that you can pilot, and they're okay. I don't feel like they added too much to the game. They weren't really necessary in my opinion, but they did do some things that I really enjoyed, like the variety of guns. That's always a thing I love. Plus you can add suppressors to everything, another thing I love. You can change up the scopes, the paints, etc. You can also get a wide variety of vehicles, and you can customize the look of those as well, which I enjoyed. So it's not new. They had a guns for hire system as well as animals for hire, I guess, but they were very specific. They weren't like in previous games where you'd set up an ambush with like 5 random, could be faceless red shirts essentially. They're actual characters. You have to do an actual mission to unlock each one of them, and they have their own personality, and I really liked that. I liked doing the missions. I liked the fact that they had their own personalities, but I will say they weren't always useful. Sometimes they were incredibly useful, and other times they were a bigger burden than not. When it comes to the gameplay, one thing that is very important in this game is the map, because it's a fairly big world, and the driving. And I found that while the driving worked well, the steering and all that worked well, Far Cry introduced an auto drive system a while back. It worked far better in the previous game than it does in this game. I found myself missing turns that I wanted to make, slowing down at times I didn't need to slow down. It was weird, it didn't function well, and the map didn't function as well as it has in previous games. And that's important because you have to mark on the map where you want to auto drive to, and sometimes it just would not register that you had a place marked, and it would just lose that mark, and it was really frustrating. As for the controls, I really enjoyed the controls in this game. I think they worked well all around. At first I found the plane and helicopter to not necessarily be intuitive, but once I got the hang of them, I really was very comfortable with them. The controls overall were excellent. Lastly, the graphics. This is a beautiful game. I really was impressed by how good it looked. That being said, I definitely ran into some graphical issues. I had a weird flickering thing for a while, then on a very specific mission, and this caused all sorts of problems, the truck just kind of began to disappear and then reappear and like flicker in and out of existence. Specifically the truck I was chasing, and then it just magically exploded on its own, and that fucked up the whole mission. It took forever to get that to work, and then it finally just magically completed on its own, which, weird but fine, whatever, I guess. It still was really distracting and unpleasant, quite frankly. Overall, I wanted to like this game, but the characters weren't as interesting. The story has an ending that just shits upon the entire thing, and I'm not going to go into details, but I really did not like the ending. And if you're thinking, well, Far Cry has multiple endings, I looked up the other endings and I was not impressed. But overall, it's not an inspired Far Cry game. 3 and 4 were fine as they were, but 5 needed to evolve a bit more than it has, so it's honestly disappointing. If you absolutely need to play Far Cry 5 at some point in your life, then wait. Wait till it comes way down in price, and wait till the glitches are fixed, because the graphical ones weren't the only things I ran into. I had to reset the game multiple times because it would just freeze. Not even really freeze, it would just be a permanent loading screen. So that was obviously infuriating, and so it's got its technical issues that need to be worked out before this game is even worth considering playing at a discounted price or renting. But honestly, unless you're like really into it, you really need something to play, I would skip it. If you're really jonesing for Far Cry, go back and replay Far Cry 3 or 4. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me if you're a doomsday prepper? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.